All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Happy Monday to you. I am so glad to be here for another HR Tech Talks conversation. And today we have Aptology joining us. And I'm not going to beat around the bush, wait around. I'm going to go ahead and bring on Caroline. Welcome to the conversation, ma'am. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
All right. It's earlier morning for you over West Coast,
Yes.
but it's nearing lunchtime for us here. So we're getting geared up for that. So again, glad to have you here. It's going to be a fun conversation. You and I have been talking for, it seems like forever, not that long actually, right? Still connected right around the beginning of everybody being locked down in their homes and everything else. We had some fun conversations about that. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Again, we only have 30 minutes or so to have a discussion. Anybody out there that's listening in, feel free to chime in. Let us know where you're listening in from. Again, Caroline is West Coast, actually dealing with the fires, kind of keeping our eye out for that news. We're praying for you guys and keeping you in our thoughts. I'm over on the central, almost East Coast, so we kind of cover the gamut. But wherever you're listening in from, make sure and chime in. Let us know. So before we get started for this and talk about Aptology, what the company does, who you're serving, let's take a minute and learn more about you. So tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Caroline Tien-Spalding, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Aptology.
Okay. And when you're not turn that into a verb and I couldn't do it. When you're not CMOing, what do you do?
What do? I care for two rambunctious little boys, and I injure myself training, and it's broken. The bone is broken.
Goodness.
And snap. Just like that. And that's it. I like to read a lot. I'm a bookworm.
All right.
Yeah.
Very cool. I don't think you can see a couple of the books back there. You can't see all the shelves, but I'm the same way. It's rare a conversation where I don't get a chance to throw a book in there or make a recommendation for somebody just because I'm always trying to soak them up, and I'm always good for another one. So if we get to
we're going to do a book off.
Today,
Yes.
You want to throw one my way, a book off. I love that. Then please do. So now that we know you a little bit, know more about what you're up to, tell us a bit about Aptology. What does the company do? Who do you serve? Let's talk about that, and we'll dig deeper into some of those things.
Yeah. Well, Aptology is a really interesting company. It fills quite a few gaps in understanding people at work. We're a people intelligent platform. And while there's a lot of solutions that try to go after the word side or the interviewing side, what we do is we actually really help leaders and teams understand behavior specifically at work so that you can coach better, so that you can hire better, so that you can really get a broader view into your talent pool internally. So we help with internal hiring quite a bit and career progression. And of course, we help with diversity and inclusion because we help people look at people differently.
Okay. Look at them not just as a resume, not just as
that's right. A bunch of words on a piece of paper.
What they say about themselves. So I think that's actually the title I used for today's conversation is more than just a resume, because that was when you and I were kind of kicking this around last week, talking about what we wanted to cover. That was one of the things that you said that I was like, that was really, really telling. So we don't have to go too far into the weeds of that conversation. But one of the things you said is you realized for most hiring, we use a job description, which is outdated at best. Right.
It's accurate and complete, isn't it? Isn't it like the most accurate and complete document ever for hiring?
I'd love to meet that person that can agree with that statement. I would love to I don't know if I'd shake your hand right now in the middle of all this, we do the fist bump, but I'd love to meet that person that says our job descriptions are completely accurate and perfect, and they represent what the person actually does day to day.
And it doesn't change.
Yeah. In general, we know that's not true. Right. But we're trying to hit that moving and soft target with a resume, which is someone else's very subjective perceptions of what they can do and what their capabilities are. And that seems to be a recipe for disaster, and using that as the only selection tool, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, when you look at the words on a job description, I mean, for one, you're space constrained, right? You're not going to write a biblical job description. I mean, you could, but it's rare. And I don't know who would read it. And then on the resume side, we are constrained by old paper, constraints. The 1 or 2 pager is what you typically will hear. Rarely do you have someone with a 17-page resume or CV. And even then, the way you describe what you have achieved and what you've worked on in particular roles differs from how I would describe it and how, unfortunately, it would probably appear in the job description. And so there are attempts to try to find synonyms and things like that. But what ends up happening is that you have a Boolean search even on LinkedIn is your constraint. And so you might try to be a human machine synonym maker matcher. But even with that, it's really hard to try to find that right match. And I think that the recruiters have done an amazing job trying to extract what really matters and find creative ways of finding those people. But more often than not, what ends up happening is that you have entire pools of talents that get excluded because of those constraints, right? And that's if that match were the best indicator, which it's not. And that's why we have other processes like interviews and questions about how have you succeeded in past roles or which challenge you've overcome. And that was one thing as a leader that was incredible to me. Like you're looking for a good fit at work and it's hard to find, but you're trying to hire amazing talent. And that's also hard to find. And how can both sides coexist, right? That's insane. And so a lot of leaders, HR practitioners have found all kinds of ways to try to get a more complete picture on what it takes to be successful in a role and how to find that in a candidate. But that process is manual. It's really difficult to extract that, let alone at speed, at scale, right? And so you wrote a white paper on quality of hire that is spot on that being a new metric, because also that's where I think from the business and the recruiter standpoint, that's where alignment is really difficult. Agreeing to that based on objective metrics and not having people fall through the process, even internally, in large companies. So we service large companies. We have one of the larger search engines as one of the partners that we have that we help trying to understand internal mobility, right? Because I was at Intel, and at Intel, it's part of the culture to have internal hires. It really is one of the core tenets. But the way it worked was you had an internal portal and then people would chat, right? Are you up for coffee? And then people would have coffee and then they would apply, which is, it's not an optimal scenario. And it really puts a lot of onus on finding the right posting in the right internal portal at the right time, where you could have a much broader pool available if you were able to understand what makes someone successful in this role, in this company, and how do I go and find that match, right, at scale, consistently. And that's another thing that we are really addressing is trying to take away some of those biases in some of the interviews. People who are really well-meaning, you have an interview panel and everybody's got their favorite questions, which they can be normalized, but the other half typically also is a problem, which is the range of correct answers. And there are a lot of well-meaning people who will disqualify a candidate because the answer didn't go, like they didn't answer the way the interviewer would have answered. And that's, HR and recruiters' nightmare, and many leaders' nightmare. Like, why did you disqualify that person? It's not, the answer you would have given, but it still works. So we actually look at behavior and quantifiably, we measure it against performance and job objective performance metrics. We try to take all that bias out and get that extra dimension. So it's that extra data that would be really impossible to do manually. There's, 500 million combinations if you're trying to do this manually for each behavior, for each job in the company. And so that's what we're going to address.
That is wild. What I love is that you and the team have really tried to get beyond just, well, this person's good at our company, and so let's just try to hire someone that looks like them or acts like them. Because you mentioned, the D&I angle a couple of times. You mentioned bias, and it's really easy as a recruiter to say, you know what, our best employees seem to come from this college, or they seem to have this thing, and that's not necessarily bad, but that shouldn't be the only thing that you're looking at. Because how do you know if you're going to be down selecting from this group of people who are perfectly qualified, they just don't look like the people that you already have at your company?
Yeah, looking like is a really interesting concept. It's actually involved in marketing as well in my field. It used to be the demographic or the zip code look alike, and we've evolved past that to behavioral, right? Mm-hmm. If you, one example I was giving you was I was a competitive sailor for a while, but I don't look like one. I swear like one outside of these interviews, but I don't look like one. However, if you were to go to the marina, you would find me. If you were to go on the water, you would find me. And at the finish line, typically on the front, you'd find me. Not at the back. So,
I got it.
You know what I mean? Like, I should have had my trophies. That'd have been a little too much. But But you would have found me, right? And that's the point, is I don't necessarily look the part, but the ocean doesn't care, the wind doesn't care. And at work, I think it's difficult to match talent to opportunity, because we haven't had historically the right tools to make this possible. It's been left to it's the combined art and science of some amazing recruiters and trying to wrangle the cowboy herding the cats of the business managers. That's what I feel like their job is like all the cats, right? And people with their perceptions of what the questions should be and what they've done. And so that's why all these other proxies have existed, right? All these other things were proxies for a long time, but they're not enough. And in sales, for example, less than half people make quota, 43%. So if it were as easy as plucking someone, putting them in, I think we would all be doing that by now. And that would have its own problems, but we'd all be doing that by now. But it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And so that's what Aptology was born out of, is this: there's got to be better. We need to service this community of work. It's huge, with better data, so that they can make better decisions along the way at hiring and then ongoing, right? For career progression, this problem is definitely prevalent. There was a really good overview. There's every year, Lean In has a McKinsey State of Women at Work report. This year, it highlighted that women are mostly stuck at the first rung of the ladder. So that transition from individual contributor to manager, that first managerial role, is out of reach for many, and more when you look at intersection segments of the population. And so, why is that? And part of it is this problem of trying to find, what does great look like in this position, in the one above, in the one above, in the one above, and how do we give visibility, right? That maybe it's not directly related. Maybe you're in a line, let's say you're in sales enablement, maybe in your direct line of command, there's no openings, but there might be one in another department where your skills of training, of explaining, of organization, detail orientation, being able to coach somebody by asking questions, not necessarily telling them what to do, would be a great fit. So trying to, broaden the talent pool even internally makes a really big difference in diversity and inclusion in particular, because, for the companies that have committed to having a more representative segment of the population, because it does deliver better results and serves the world at large, right? Your population reflects the population that you're trying to serve. Even in those companies where they are able to attract a representative segment of the population, they have the leakiest bucket. They lose as many of those diverse candidates as they hire every single year. So we have to look at, the ability to provide opportunity inside and not just from the outside.
That's one of the things that we've actually kind of focused on in our research on internal mobility and moving people throughout the business. Audrey made a comment a little bit ago that when you're talking about kind of, let's not just copy this person over and over because they're not the right person. She said that's a subculture of robots. I love that imagery of
yeah,
let's just do that without any thought to it, without any thought to how this process works. But what we found is exactly what you're saying, the leakiest bucket. I love that analogy, because companies are like, we want to do a great job of hiring in a diverse way. We want to bring in women, minorities, people of color. We want to bring them into our organization. But then when it comes to advancing them through the business, they're like, I'm not sure if we're comfortable with that. We're okay with this. We're not comfortable with that. And because they aren't willing to move them up, they end up, like you said, losing them. And that's a shame. And that's got to be a huge point of friction for those companies that are trying to do better at that. That's one of the reasons that I was really fascinated by the work that you and the team at Aptology are doing, is because it's about, let's learn your behaviors, those things that make you different from everybody else, and figure out if there's a way to try to tie you back into one of these other roles. That example you gave earlier, where this is, when you think of your career path, it's here, but there might be something right over here that's outside of that you didn't even know is over there. But the kinds of things you have to be good at are very similar to the things you have to be good at in your current role. And if I can just find a way to put you over there, it might mean that you can contribute in a new way. You get to advance into leadership. You get to realize your dream. I don't know, all these kind of great things. One other thing, though, that occurred to me as you talked about the sales example. I had a conversation last week with a friend. He was telling me about a sales issue they had at one of his previous companies, where they had a handful of people on the sales team who were not cutting it. And when they got ready to actually start firing these people, and they spent a little bit of time with each of them, realized that they were spending their time actually coaching other people on their selling. And if they had spent their time all on selling, probably fine, but they were really excited about training and coaching and developing and mentoring other people. And so they moved them into sales leadership roles and took the quota away from them as a requirement. And they were actually able to enable better performance for the entire team, because as well as I do, one of the things that managers are usually struggling with, and we try to get them to do it and they just don't do it well, is that mentoring, that coaching, that supporting. And these people were doing that just as part of their daily course of work because they liked it and they wanted to. So they found a way to slot them in to those roles that fit their expertise, their abilities, and it actually ultimately lifted the performance of the entire team. So I love stories like that kind of tie into what you're saying there, that there's a fit for everybody. We have to help find it, though. And the ways we've been doing it are not very adequate.
Well, and the first in our book off is going to be Good to Great, right? So Jim Collins, it's a classic for a good reason. But in Good to Great, so he talks about bringing the right people on the bus, and then you figure out where they fit on the bus. That sounds great, Jim. How do you do that without Aptology, right? That's really difficult to do, to find the right seat, the right people, and then the right seat. And there's so many amazing examples from our customers that are super inspiring. People who look broader, right? Just the way you described. There was one example in a medical device company where they had two teams. They had an SMB in sales, SMB team in enterprise. And typically the progression will be from SMB to enterprise, which means if you don't succeed in SMB, you will not advance to enterprise, where the commissions are a little bit bigger. And vice versa. Think if you don't make it in enterprise, you just fall off. That's it. Poof. That's it. There's the cliff. And what they did was they looked at what it took to be successful, and it really narrows it down, because you can get a lot of feedback on things that actually don't move the needle on your job. That's the other thing that's insane, right? Is the amount of energy and feedback that we get that actually does not impact performance at all. We're just taking guesses, right? And it's people's past experiences of where they think, and they're well-meaning, but it actually doesn't move the needle. In this case, one of the things that was really incredible to watch was in the enterprise role, one of the key behaviors that made someone successful in enterprise was a balance. There's a lot of assessments out there that you either you're super talkative or not talkative at all, or you're somewhere in the middle. Good luck. So in this case, it was 2/3 of the way through about, right? And what was fascinating was that they kept hiring the super talkative people, right? The stereotypes, the people who shake everybody's hands and say, "Hey, Ben, you know what I'm saying, Ben? With the books, Ben, that you see in the back, Ben." Say your name all the time, just so that I guess they can remember themselves. I don't know. So the most successful sales enterprise executives actually had a balance of listening and talking, which actually makes sense when you think about it, really understanding the customer, what their product line is. In SMB, however, the stereotype did a lot better, the talkative, because it's a much more transactional sale. And so when the leaders saw that and the opportunity of the groups within that they could make switches, it became a problem of, okay, do we want to change the commission structure so that we don't incentivize the wrong path? And that's what they did. And they were able to increase revenue by 27%, right? Which is incredible. It's an incredible result. And you'd think it's magic, right? It's not magic. It's behavioral science. And it also helped retention. I mean, where attrition is a problem, and there's a lot of different places where attrition is a problem. Call centers is one. Just people who don't have a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of them in each company. Undesired attrition, which is really difficult to quantify because once people leave, there might be a different narrative as to why they left. It's really hard to actually tease out something negative like that. But they were actually also able to reduce attrition by 30%. I'm going to quote our CTO here for a second. Brad Benson was CTO of Taleo, and he saw this problem a lot with his very large customer base. And he used to say, one of the things that was frustrating to see was that essentially we had this great tool, but if people don't get career path in their current company, your competitors will career path them for you. They will see they'll get the information because you have more information on people from the outside than the inside. So you keep hiring from the outside and people end up at your competitors, yes. Your top performers. And so there's got to be a better way. He was like, there has to be a better way to career path people in and not out. So that was a really interesting story. And behavior is proven to be a key indicator of performance. It's not everything, but it's a key missing piece right now. Right now you have, LinkedIn, you have history, and Unfortunately, in too many companies, if the manager leaves, all the data on that person is gone. If you move teams, all the data is gone or not usable for a variety of reasons, because of the systems, how they talk to each other or don't. The way things are written, even performance reviews, is not actually queryable or reliable. So yeah.
Or reliable. I'm glad you slipped that one in there.
And or, actually accurate.
Let's go
Yeah.
through this laundry list of why they're not going to work.
Yeah.
I don't know that I can't recommend my own book and the book off because that's not fair. But one of the studies that I cite in there, they actually went through and looked at performance review data, because when I remember the first time we talked, I was like, let's look at performance data. It's got to be objective though, because what they found in this study was they broke it out by the feedback that women got and the feedback that men got. And they said, hey, look, they got about the same volume. That's a good finding.
That's wonderful.
Feedback. When they started digging into it, they said men got feedback like, hey, Ben, you're not very good at this. You need to get better at that. Here's some ideas. Here's a mentor. Here's an expert. Here's a course. Here's how you can fix that deficiency you have. For the women, it was, Caroline, you're not very good at this thing. You really need to fix that so you can move up, or you can improve your standing, or you can whatever, be taken seriously. But it's not actionable. It wasn't anything you actually do.
Yeah. It's not specific. It's not smart. It's not specific. It's not measurable. It's not actionable.
All those things.
Yeah, it's not time bound. Yeah.
So that's the thing I thought of at first. And again, some of the examples you're talking about, let's tie in with sales data. That's actual for our sales team. We can prove that when this thing happens, that other outcome happens.
That's right.
It also reminds me of a story, a case study that I had published a couple of years ago. An organization was hiring nurses and was churning them through, and everybody knows like there's a shortage of them all the time, it feels like. And so they realized that if they started looking at the behaviors, their preferences on the behavior side, there were some of them that were very good with customer facing, interaction with families, things like that. Other ones were like, I want to stick to the script. I've got a checklist. I've got to do this work. And that's what where their focus was. It's just their natural inclination. And so when I started sorting them into different jobs based on just that one specific element, whether they were really good and patient facing or the people who were really focused on the clinical side, their turnover dropped tremendously because they were able to spend time doing the thing they actually cared about and that aligned with them. And that ties back to the things you were talking about earlier, the retention piece of that. It might be nothing more than getting people aligned with the job that actually fits how
hard is that? How hard is that, right? I mean, we've sort of cracked the code of that on personal relationships a little bit, right? Like you've got online services that help you figure out what it is you're looking for, really, that you may not know, and what that other person is looking for, maybe that they may not know, and then matching you up. We didn't have that at work, and so people would ask the question, what are your strengths and weaknesses? One of my favorite questions. Love that question. Because I
care too much and I try too hard.
Yeah, and everybody is now trained to believe, right? Like there's a downside to everything, and you're gonna like get ambushed with that question. But the truth is, most people don't know, right? They don't unless you have extremely high self-awareness or you've gotten enough feedback, right? The right kind of feedback. You don't actually know context-wise in these scenarios. This is why I shine. And same thing on weaknesses. And there's this idea of like a binary or a singular answer, like it's a math question. From a behavioral standpoint, it could be a math question, but the answer is actually very nuanced, which is it depends on the job in the company. And to your point, you could be in a different job in the same company, right? Or a nurse serving different communities, and the behavior that's going to be a great fit for you is different. And trying to do this manually is almost impossible. It feels like a moving target. And without that, it's a big guessing game. And some people are better at it than others. But even the best people are like, baseball players, they hit it maybe 53% of the time, 56, right? And the remaining of our lives is in the balance. So there, we were born at the idea that there has to be a better way that we could equip people with that data. And we did. We have some amazing, as I said, customers in medical devices and technology and software and cybersecurity. And it's about tying it to objective metrics. And it's really also given a lot of people that light bulb. And that was how I joined Aptology, actually, was, I was given the survey, I filled it out. And so there's a portrait. It just tells you what your zones are in communication and stress. And it's 14 different areas. And then there's a section that says, you do best in the environments where, and you do worse with the environments are X. And I was like, oh my goodness, you see me. this explains so much. Why did I not have this decades ago? I needed that. I needed it not just yesterday. I needed this last millennium. So it's, that empowerment of knowledge, the individual knowledge as well, and how you can complement yourself. So if you're a little bit more creative and less disciplined, you can actually scaffold yourself, right? And say, okay, like I'm going to pair myself with someone who's more organized, or get myself a process where I have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. This way I've got that. I don't have to imagine that process. It's there. And then I can do my things within those boundaries, right? So there are ways to address that, but without tying it back then to objective performance in different roles, it's hard to know which of these areas matter the most. You might be getting feedback on completely the wrong thing, or no feedback at all, which is often the case.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. So much good stuff here. I'm trying to decide which thing to even pick up on. How about I don't comment on that at all? Because I agree completely that there is time for a better way. We need to get better. And I'm going to go to one of the comments. Stephen made a comment, and he's joining the book off, apparently. Dale Carnegie, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Said
yes,
the person's
a
name
classic.
is the sweetest and most important sound in any language. And he said maybe those extroverts are a little bit going overboard with using that a little bit too much. That's just their way of life. But there's just another book to recommend in this conversation. So perfect. All kidding aside, if someone is interested in learning more about what you guys are doing at Aptology, learn more about I don't know if there's case studies on the website. I don't remember that actually, so I don't need to offer that. But whatever you got there, what resources you have, I know there's an ebook somewhere in the mix there. Yes. What's the best way for someone to reach out or connect with you guys?
So the best way is to go on aptology.com. So that's www.aptology.com, as you saw on the slide. And since we're airplane, maybe I should try like the international alphabet or something. I'll probably get it wrong because I haven't used it in a while. Like Apple, Paul, Time. Yeah, I already got one wrong. I'm pretty sure. Orange, Lima. I got Lima, Orange, Grandpa. Is it Yo-Yo the last one? Yo-Yo, Yoga?
I don't remember actually. I sometimes think about those. Here we go. I'll try to get that. There we go, up on screen, so they can check out Aptology and learn more about what you and the team.
I thought you were going to put the international, the aviation alphabet up.
Alpha was something.
Oh, okay. Yes, you got the first. Okay, well, in that off, you won that off.
I used to work for a genuine war hero, and so he was quick to use the phonetic alphabet, and I had to learn those things in order to have a conversation with anybody at the company. So they started slipping on me now, but I had them figured out at one time. Oh, so anyway, so go to Aptology. They can learn more. They can see what you're up to. If they want to reach out, they're welcome to do that.
We're on LinkedIn. We also have ongoing conversations every Thursday usually. So feel free to reach out.
Okay, wonderful. This has been fun for me. Again, you and I get a chance to nerd out a little bit on selection and bias and how to do it better. And it's a problem that everybody recognizes that's been on the HR side and the recruiting side. We recognize that when we often hate it, but until now it's just been like, we'll throw more time at it, put more effort into it. And we know that's not a real solution. No one has unlimited time, unlimited money. And again, if you do, you're probably the person that likes your job descriptions that you mentioned at the very beginning. That's probably you too. So I'd love to talk with you still, that unicorn. But the truth is that we need a better way. And I'm really glad to have a conversation and learn more about how you and the team are helping companies kind of solve that.
Thank you for having me today and for the book off.
Anytime to swap book stories is a good time for me. So thank you again for joining us. I appreciate you. To everybody else, thanks for hanging out with us for a little bit for HR Tech Talks. I look forward to catching you next time. Have a good one.
Have a good week.